The Battle of Tacna, also known as the Battle of Alliance Heights, effectively destroyed the Peru-Bolivian alliance against Chile, forged by a secret treaty signed in 1873. On May 26, 1880, the Chilean Northern Operations Army led by General Manuel Baquedano González conclusively defeated a Peru-Bolivian army commanded by Bolivian President General Narciso Campero, after almost 5 hours of fierce combat. This battle took place at the Inti-Urquil Plateau, a few miles north of the Peruvian city of Tacna. As a result, Bolivia was knocked out of the war, leaving Peru to fight the rest of the war alone. Also, this victory consolidated the Chilean domain over the Tarapacá province, territory definitively annexed to Chile after the signing of the Tratado de Rancon in 1884, which ended the war. Tacna itself remained under Chilean control until 1929. Prologue. After the Bolivian government threatened to confiscate the Chilean Antofagasta Nitrate and Railway Company on 1 February 1879, Chile sent troops to Antofagasta and took the city on 14 February. Obliged by a secret cooperation treaty signed with Bolivia on 6 February 1873, Peru was forced into the conflict. Despite Peruvian efforts to avoid a confrontation, Chile, by then aware of the secret pact, declared war on both countries on 5 April. Once started, the conflict began on the sea, since its domination was crucial for the war effort development. The Chilean Navy had serious problems with its Peruvian counterpart at the beginning, as the Monitor Rascar, commanded by Admiral Miguel Grau Seminario, scored several victories at Iquique and other engagements. The lack of results determined the resignation of both Navy and Army commanders, replaced by Commodore Rivas and General Erasmo Escala. Finally, Rivas eliminated Huasca's threat by capturing her in the decisive encounter of Angamos on 8 October. With the sea assured, the Chileans began to prepare the invasion of the Tarapacá department. Accordingly, Chile launched an amphibious operation at Pisagua on 2 November, successfully pushing the Allies inland and isolating the strongholds of Arica and Iquique. Escala's army continued moving into the Peruvian department seeking water supplies to support the beachhead of Pisagua. A scout mission encountered and crushed 2 Allied squadrons at Pampa de Mania on 6 November. 2 weeks later, on 19 November, an outnumbered Colonel Emilio Sotomayor defeated General Buendía at San Francisco Hill, near Dolores. This action was marked by the failed March of Daza, with the bulk of Bolivian army. This is known until this day as the Cameronese betrayal. These victories made the Chileans too confident. A poorly planned attack over Buendía's army remains at Tarapacá confronted 4,000 Peruvians against 2,200 Chileans under Carl Luis Artiga. The battle ended with almost 30% of Artiaga's men dead, wounded or captured. The Allies, despite of his victory, Buendía left Tarapacá under Chilean control. The Allies withdrew to Arica in an extenuating and perilous march, and lost almost 2,000 men. When arrived, both Buendía and Davila were removed from their commissions and court-martialed. Additionally, the lack of results generated popular discontent in Peru and Bolivia. This was determinant for the deposition of the President of Peru, Mariano Ignacio Prado, and his Bolivian counterpart, Hilarión Daza. Both were deposed and replaced by Nicolás de Pierala and General Narciso Campero, respectively. Also, the loss of the Tarapacá department stopped the earnings of the saltpeter trade, making the war financial weight heavier for the Allies. The Chileans. After being defeated at Tarapacá, the Chileans went quiet for some time. The government in Santiago believed that with the capture of Tarapacá, Peru would be inclined to sign a truce, allowing to keep the recently gained territory as war compensation. Also, Chile saw how civilian volunteers increased the army contingent up to 10,000 men in less than 6 months. Besides, the control of Antofagasta meant an extra cash flow from the saltpeter exportation, making possible to purchase weapons, clothes, food and other war materials the expanding army would require, easing the burden of war expenditures. Allied army. The Allies had about 11,000 men between Tacna and Arica. Also, the new Bolivian president Narciso Campero managed to send another division to Tacna. But there were disagreements about how to face the enemy between Admiral Lizardo Montero and Pierrola's deputy, Pedro del Solar, wasting precious time in internal disputes whilst the Chileans marched towards Tacna. Meanwhile, the Peruvian vessel Union broke through the blockade on Arica, delivering supplies, medicines and shoes to the port garrison. The army present in Tacna had about 10,000 men and 31 cannons, 6 Krupp cannons, 6 machine guns, 2 Lahit cannons, 7 4-straight cannons and 12 Blackie cannons. The Allied infantry had to fight with different types of rifles, making it harder to supply them. Chilean Army. The Chilean High Command planned a landing at Ilo and Pacocha to scout the country and to gain knowledge of the Allies' status. Following 2 previous incursions, 10,000 men were unshipped at Ilo. By the time of these events, Gen. Erasmo Escala resigned to his commission as commander-in-chief due to constant arguments with War Minister Rafael Sotomayor. The latter appointed General Manuel Baquedna González, a Peru-Bolivian Confederacy war veteran, who had the sympathies and respect of the soldiers, as his successor. Since the beginning of the conflict, the infantry was equipped with Comblain and upgraded GRA rifles, using the same type of bullets. The artillery had 37 cannons, 20 Krupp cannons and 17 mountain cannons. Preliminary moves. A Chilean expeditionary force disembarked at Ilo on the 31st of December, to take the port and eliminate any resistance in the region. Under Lt. Col. Aristides Martinez, the Chileans took control of the town and severed the telegraph to Moquegua. Afterwards, the expedition took the train to Moquegua, and seized the town the next morning. Then, Martinez returned to Ilo and sailed back to Pisagua on January 2. With this successful campaign, Sotomayor decided to attack Tacna and Arica with the whole army, leaving Moquegua alone. A massive landing took place between the 18th of February and the 25th of February. In 2 separated waves, 4 divisions disembarked at Ilo. On the 27th, the Chilean Navy began the bombardment of Arica, where Huasca's new captain Manuel Thompson died. On the 8th of March, another Chilean expedition of 900 soldiers under Colonel Rosembo Barboza was sent to Molenda. 10 days later, Gen. Campero's 5th Division reached Tacna, assuming control of the Allied army. By the end of the month, the Peruvian stronghold of Los Angeles Hill, a position considered unbreakable by the Allies, fell to Baquedano. Shortly after, the Chileans marched across the desert to Tacna, but the artillery had to be re-embarked and shipped to Ite, while on the 9th of April, the Peruvian port of El Callao was set under blockade. On the 20th of May, Minister Rafael Sotomayor died of a stroke at Las Llares. The Chilean president Aníbal Pinto appointed José Francisco Vergara as the new war minister in campaign. Whilst the Chilean army developed in the Tacna department, the Allies had their own problems. Montero wanted to wait for the Chileans at Tacna, but Col. Eliodoro Camacho supported the idea to march and ambush them at the Sama River Valley, easing the communications with Arequipa. Trying to avoid any confrontation, Gen. Campero traveled to Tacna to take charge, assuming his command on April 19. On the night of the 25th of May, Campero's troops tried to ambush the Chileans at Quebrada Honda, but the darkness and the mist prevented the Allies from doing so, forcing their return to Tacna for defense preparations. The battlefield. The Antioquia Plateau is an arid and soft-sloped terrain located a few miles north from Tacna, becoming an excellent shooting ground. It has on the rear a series of little sand accumulations that allowed the concealment of reserve units behind them. The flanks are protected by the Tacna road from the east, and to the west by an almost impossible-to-walk terrain, where no artillery could ever be placed, and a harsh field for infantry or cavalry movement. Allies' plan and distribution. The Allied plan relied on the terrain tactical advantages, so the strategy was to wait the attack from a strong position. So, the army was set on the southern edge of the Antioquia Plateau, deployed in a 3 km defensive line. The troops did not make any defenses or trenches, apart from little sand defenses for the artillery on their right wing. Campero divided his army into 3 major sectors, with the right wing under the command of Lizardo Montero, the center led by Col. Manuel Castro Pinto, and the left flank commanded by Col. Eliodoro Camacho. The Southern Peruvian Army and the Bolivian Army added up 21 battalions and 8 machine guns with 9 cannons, plus 8 cavalry squadrons. Chilean plan and troop deployment. Baquedano had 2 attack plans before him. The first one was a flanking maneuver on the Allied right proposed by War Minister Vergara. On the other hand, Col. Velázquez had the idea to engage the whole enemy front in a simultaneous and frontal charge, taking advantage of the defensive line thinness. Hence, the troops couldn't be moved from one point to another, avoiding that the weaker points generated during the battle could be reinforced. Besides, the lack of trenches and fortifications would make this breaking easier. Baquedano decided to use Velázquez's plan. Thus, the infantry split into 5 divisions, with the 1st Division of Col. Santiago Amengual right next to the 2nd Division of Col. Francisco Barcelo on front. Right behind them was Col. José Amunategui's 3rd Division and Col. Orozimbo Barbos's 4th Division deployed on a 3rd line, and behind these 2 was the reserve of Col. Mauricio Munoz. Velázquez's artillery had 37 cannons and 4 machine guns, and the cavalry was composed of 3 regiments, with a fraction detached to the 2nd Division and the rest with Baquedano's chief staff. The Chilean army presented at Tacna a total of 16 battalions, 3 cavalry regiments and 37 cannons. The battle began with useless artillery crossfire, because the projectiles buried in the sand and didn't explode. According to Velázquez's plan, around 10 a.m., Amengual began the march against Camacho, followed by Barcelo, who was to attack the Allied center. Both divisions advanced under heavy fire, but failed to hit the Allies at the same time. Amengual engaged first, allowing Campero to send in Herrera's division, followed by the Alianza or Roma battalions from the right flank reserve. When Barcelo approached to Castro Pinto, the 2nd Line Regiment recognized the Peruvian Zapata Battalion, the unit that took its banner at Tarapacá, in front of it, and charged. Until now, only 4,500 soldiers had assaulted the Allied front. When Camacho saw his units retreating, he ordered his rearguard to fire upon the fugitives. The Allies' counter-attack. By 11 a.m., Camacho had several units lined up, among them the Sucre, Libas del Sur and Viedma battalions. A brief calm in the Chilean attack misled him and ordered to charge. However, an unseen maneuver performed by Velázquez's artillery proved deadly and decimated the Allied left by entire ranks. Pretty soon, Camacho's advance was obliterated by a precise and concentric fire that killed about 80% of the soldiers within the hour. Once arrived, the reserve counterattacked Amengual immediately. Amengual's men had already exhausted their ammunition, and they had to fall back under heavy fire. Barcelo faced the same problem, and retreated as well with heavy casualties. The Atacama Regiment alone lost almost half of its personnel. Meanwhile, Baquedana sent Amunategui to reinforce the vanguard, and moved the artillery forward. Chilean breakthrough to ease the retreat. Vergara ordered Java's Granada Rosa Caballo Regiment to charge. Although Murguia's men received the cavalry in square formations and rejected it, they were stopped, giving the Mengual and Barcelo enough time to regroup and resupply. When Java retreated, Amunategui's division arrived, and along with the Mengual caught the Bolivians in a heavy crossfire, tearing them to pieces. Both divisions advanced covered by the closer artillery fire, and forced the Allies back to their initial positions. The Chileans kept pushing forward. When both armies were close, the Chilean divisions assaulted the defensive line. One of the bigger Allied units, the Victoria Battalion, gave under the pressure, and withdrew, breaking the Allied line. Meanwhile the Allied left and centre were being broken. Barbossa's division engaged the weakened Allied right. His troops encountered light resistance and outflanked the position. Once the Peruvians were outmaneuvered and forced back, Barbossa captured the artillery batteries on the sector. Baquedana sent in the reserve, which engaged the Allied right flank combined with the remains of the Atacama Battalion. With this final move, the defensive front collapsed, and the Allies fled from the battlefield after 5 hours. While the Allies retreated to Tacna, a Mengual chased him until reaching the city. Later, Tacna was shelled in order to force the surrender, and finally Col. Santiago, a Mengual, entered into the city around 1830. Aftermath: the Chilean army had 2,200 casualties. Mengual's, Barcelo's and Amunategui's divisions, which added up 6,500 men, had 1,639 dead and wounded. Barbossa's division lost 15% of its force. The Chilean reserve almost did not fight, having only 17 wounded. The Atacama and Santiago regiments lost almost 50% of their effective force. Also the second line, Navales and Valparaiso regiments had severe losses. The second-line regiment Banner lost at the Battle of Tarapacá was found on a church in Tacna by Ruperto Marchant Pereira. The Allies had casualties estimated between 3,500 and 5,000 men. The Bolivian army lost 23 officers from major to general. The Colorados battalion had only 293 survivors, while the Aroma battalion, also known as Amarillo, lost 388 soldiers. Since these units chose to fight to the end instead of retreating, the Peruvian army lost 185 officers, and more than 3,000 soldiers died. According to a communication of Sola to Pierrala, only 400 Peruvian men escaped from the battle. Military and political results: the defeat had a decisive impact upon the Allies. Gen. Campero withdrew to Bolivia, taking the road to Palcar. Meanwhile Montero retired to Puno, passing through Tarita. The battle broke the alliance. The crippled Bolivian army didn't participate in the war again, forcing Bolivia to accept its complete defeat. On Peru's side, its army had to fall back north, isolating the garrison at Arica, which fell to the Chileans 2 weeks later. For Chile, the victory allowed it to concentrate its efforts on conquering Lima, since it was clear to the Chilean leadership that only the fall of the Peruvian capital could end the war. Bibliography: Bonis, Gonzalo. La Guerra del Pacifico 1879–1884. Editorial del Pacifico. Meleif, Rafael, Pelayo, Mauricio. La Guerra del Pacifico en Imágenes, Relatos, Testimonios. Centro de Estudios Bicentenario. Ejército de Chile. Batalla de Tacna. Retrieved 2008. Museo Histórico Militar de Chile. Batalla de Tacna o del Alto de la Alianza. Retrieved 2008. Harvard College Library. La Batalla de Tacna. Retrieved 2008.